Yes, you. Welcome to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast, a podcast for people who want to disrupt their lives for a good reason, to make it count. I'm your host, Jen Glantz, and every week I'll drop a new episode with stories from real people just like you, who woke up one morning and decided to make big changes, starting with small things. We'll cover topics like entrepreneurship, love, failure, and self-care. Hey, you're not getting any younger, so let's make this an adventure. Ready? Hey, any youngers, it's me, your host, Jen Glantz, back with another episode of the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. I am so thrilled to be back here with you today with a brand new episode. I've been thinking a lot about this topic over the past couple of weeks, and it's come even more to light as I've been speaking to some friends recently. And I wanted to share this topic with you. So today's episode is called The Number One Trick to Understand People Better. And that trick is something so simple, so cliche, and probably something you've heard before. The trick is all about learning how to read between the lines, realizing that the stories we see and the stories people tell us are not always the full story. And sometimes if we love a person or care about a person or have a friend we absolutely adore, sometimes it's our job, it's our chance to ask certain questions and to do certain things to get the full story from them. So let me share a little bit about what I mean. And I have a couple of examples for you that all stem from social media. So a couple of weeks ago, I was on social media and I saw a bunch of my friends get together. They were in another state and I was like, wow, the pictures make it look like they had so much fun. It was like 4 of them smiling. The caption was like, so great to be reunited with my group of girls. Like, it just looked like such a fun time. Everyone was smiling. When I looked at the person's Instagram story, it just seemed like everyone was having the best time. And I was so happy for them. I wish I could have been there, but I just wasn't able to make it, to travel there. And everyone just looked like they were having a great time. And I was like, wow, this is so awesome. Good for them. Happy everyone's back together. Happy things are going well. And a couple of days after the party ended, I called up one of the friends to catch up. And I was like, tell me more about getting together with everyone. How was it? And she was like, Jen, it was awful. It was so awful. There were so many things that went wrong. First of all, this person was just like upset the whole night, brought down the whole mood. Another person ended up bringing a bunch of other people who weren't invited. Another person showed up 30 minutes late. And the more this person was telling me about the situation, the more it looked absolutely nothing like social media. In fact, this person was struggling after the get-together just with so many emotions and feelings and just wasn't feeling happy. But yet, how would I have known that? How would anybody have known that? By just looking at the social media. The same thing happened a couple of days later. A friend of mine has this really cool job where he's constantly on the go. He's always traveling. He's got like a really important job. And the other day I saw him posting on social media that he was traveling to all these countries and he was getting all these awesome opportunities at work. Like, based on his social media, you would have thought that he was crushing the game. Like, so many awesome things were happening to him. And I reached out just to check in, see how he was. And he wrote back saying to me too that he's really not doing well. He's exhausted. That trip was horrible. And there's just so many things going on in his life that he's trying to figure out how to unpack right now. And again, none of us would know any of that from social media. I can go on and on and on with my examples here, and I'm sure that you can too. And this is all to say that we actually don't know what the real story is with anybody in our lives. I was thinking about this the other day. There's the story we tell people, the stories we post on social media, the ones we tell acquaintances and people in passing, the one where you run into somebody at the park and they ask how you are and you say great. There's that category of stories. Now, those stories are the most misleading, those stories are the most false, and those stories are not the ones we can ever go off of. And yet we do. There's so many people who see what I post on social media and think they know 1,000% of my life, but they only know a sliver of it. So they'll assume things like everything is great and I'm doing so well and life is awesome and I know exactly what I'm doing. And there's some truth to that, right? But there's also so many other dimensions to my everyday life, to my mental health, to what is going on with me that I don't share on social media, that you have to almost read between the lines or ask me the right questions to really get to know that. And it's the same with you. Now, then there's a category of stories that we tell our friends or the people that we really love. And now we're getting closer to the truth here, right? Because we're telling these people these stories in hopes of getting some reaction, maybe in hopes of them taking some sort of action. But that category of stories is closer and closer to the truth, though it's not always there. Sometimes based on who we're telling, we leave out certain details, facts, and feelings because maybe we don't want to hurt them, or maybe we don't want to say a certain thing to them, or maybe we're protecting something with them. And then there's the stories we tell ourselves, which is the true stories, because it's very hard for you to lie to yourself when you're unpacking what's going on and what's happening. Of course, you can lie to yourself sometimes with how you say things or how you view things or your perception of things, but for the most part, you're not always lying to yourself. That's the closest version of truth. Now, if you pick apart just one story, maybe even one answer to the question, how are you? What you say to the people in your life who are acquaintances is very different than how you would answer that question to the people you love, which is very, very different than how you would answer it to your own self. All of that is to say, if there is somebody in your life you love and care and adore and you want to find out what's going on with them, don't look at the stories they post on social media just for the people in their life. And listen very closely when they tell you a story because there is always something they're leaving out. So I thought of some tips. I brainstormed 4 different ways that we can better understand the people around us. We can get them to open up, to share the truth, to really unpack what is going on in their lives so that we, on the other end of it, don't have to assume. Number 1, ask honest questions. Whenever I ask a person, hey, how are you? I care about their response. I care about their response so much that I don't accept one-word answers because none of us are one-word answers. The answer to the question of how are you should be one that is all over the place, that takes 90 seconds, 6 minutes to answer, though we've become so accustomed to answer it with one word. I'm okay. I'm good. I'm fine. Whenever I ask someone the question, how are you, and they answer it in one word, I always respond, tell me more about that. Now, the random acquaintance I meet in the park will suddenly usually start telling me more about that. They'll tell me about problems at work or with their family or how they're just feeling down. And a good friend will go even further and unpack those stories with details, but follow-up questions that are honest and important and show that you care, get people to open up. Even when I see people post awesome things, like vacations with their families or really awesome parts of their life, rather than me accepting that as something that's surface level good, I'll always ask important questions. Like, how were you feeling during it? Was it what you expected? Questions that get people to open up. The more people open up, the more you're able to understand them. Another thing that's important is to share your honest feelings. And I've been trying to do this more and more and more. You know, there's a situation a couple of weeks ago where I felt a little bit off with one of my friends. I just felt like there was maybe some tension or they were frustrated by me or things weren't going so well. And I texted them saying, hey, is everything okay with us? And they responded, yeah, of course, everything is great. Now, I could have taken it like that was and ended it, but luckily, this person called me. I should have called them. Luckily, this person called me, and we talked through it. I explained where I was coming from, why I felt those things, and they responded with how they felt, and they were not mad at me. They were completely fine, but deeper conversations like that, sharing honest feelings, whether you're the one that shares it or the other person is, allows you to understand people better, build better connections with them, and let go of some of the unspoken communication that happens inside of relationships. Number 3 is not to assume, and we talked a lot about this, right? Oftentimes we just assume things about other people. And what I mean by that is we assume everything's okay because they posted a smiling photo on Instagram. We assume they're living their best lives because they posted they're planning a trip in November to Mexico. We think everything is okay because they're simply texting us, yeah, everything's good, when we ask them how they are. Don't assume. Don't take things at surface level. Always try to ask more questions, to follow up with them, to give them a phone call and see how things are. And finally, read between the lines, which sort of summarizes everything we've spoken about here, which is when someone is telling you something, ask the right questions, share honest feelings, and don't assume. That way you can get to the root of what a person is trying to tell you. I think a trick to understanding people is realizing that we don't understand people and that the methods that we typically use fail us. And those methods are just accepting their first answer or seeing what's out there or, seeing what they post occasionally on social media and thinking we know about their lives. That's faulty. That's wrong. Look who's in your life right now. Who out there needs you to read more between the lines. And if you're not sure, take some inventory on your friends. Reach out to the ones you love and adore. See how they are. And when they say they're doing okay, ask them again to tell you more about that. I'm Jen Glantz. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Until next week, all my love. Hey, and by the way, if you're enjoying this show, it would mean so much to me if you would take your phone right now. Yes, take your phone right now, pull it out, and subscribe to this podcast. If you're listening to it on Spotify or iTunes, you'll see a button right there to subscribe. When you subscribe, what's going to happen is every time there's a new episode, which there is one time a week, that episode will land on your phone. Now, subscribing to this podcast helps me so much. It allows more and more people to see this show. And if you have an additional 5 seconds, if you could leave the show a review, that would be golden. Thank you all so much for being loyal and incredible listeners. I am Jen Glantz. More to come next week. I'll talk to you then. Hey you. Thank you for listening to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. There are hundreds of thousands of pods out there, so thank you for listening to this one. You can find the show notes for this week's episode up on our website, anyyounger.com. Subscribe, rate, and review the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast on iTunes so that other ears around the world can listen too. Oh, and join our secret You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group, where over 1,000 people are talking about how to disrupt their lives, for a good reason, to make it count. Until next week, all my love, Jen Glantz.